Hello everyone and welcome to this SimCAT 1 review that I am going to do. So for the benefit of all of you who have appeared for the SimCAT or who are going to appear for the SimCAT, I have done this review. So I have gone through this test on my own. I timed myself, took this test as an aspirant, and there are a few things that I thought were special to this test. So I'm here to discuss those. Now before we start, there are a couple of things. The first thing is, if you are planning to purchase the SimCATs, then you can use the code 0.99IMS. It's there in the description box below. So have a look at it. Use that code to avail a flat 10% discount. Also, as a part of this particular bid that we have, you are going to experience 3 sessions from my end if you sign up using this coupon code when you are making the purchase of the SimCATs. Now let's start with the SimCAT 1 review that we have here. So overall, what exactly was the test like? What were the things that you had to keep in mind and how exactly did it pan out? So the first thing, I would say that it was a moderate to difficult test. It was pretty similar to what CAT 24 looked like. Now in terms of VARC, the section I thought was moderate to difficult. I will describe each section in great detail in the coming slides, and I will also have some takeaways at the end. So make sure that you stay tuned till the very end to get those key takeaways from this test as well. In terms of DILR, I thought it was a moderate section. It had some highlights, it had some difficult sets, but it was on at an overall level, it was moderate in terms of the level of difficulty. In terms of quant, again, I thought it was very similar to what DILR looked like. In fact, the split in terms of the easy, moderate and difficult questions was very similar when it comes to the QA section and the DILR section of this particular mock. As I said earlier, it was pretty similar to CAT 2024, not in terms of content, but in terms of level of difficulty. So I would not say that you had the exact same questions that you got in CAT 2024. The questions were all novel, but if you look at the level of difficulty, I think it was a very good representation of what CAT 24 looked like. Now in terms of being able to practice this, so if you are someone who wants to take this test, this is the time when you leave the video. I'll be very sad to let go of you at this point in time, but come back to this video once you have taken the test, because once you have taken the test, I think you will be able to engage in a better manner with the content that is going to come up after this. But if you are planning to take a test which is very similar to what CAT looks like, I think this is the test that you should be taking. Now in terms of the first section or the first area of the first section, which is reading comprehension, I thought it was a fairly easy to moderate kind of an area in this particular test. The first passage that I came across was on foresight. This was an easy passage. There were 3 easy questions and 1 moderate question that were there. It was a fairly straightforward passage to read. It basically told about how humans have the foresight. So we all know about the thing of hindsight, wherein we think about things that have happened in the past, but we also have the foresight to see things that might happen in the future. So it was a very interesting read. Even if you were not aware of the topic, I think it was a very easy read, breezy read for all of you who were in this particular, who would have attempted this particular test. The second passage that I came across was again an interesting one. This is something that a lot of us know about, which is the ozone layer. Now the ozone layer is basically a layer that envelops the earth and it kind of screens the harmful UV rays that come from the sun towards the earth. Now it was a very easy passage to read. It was very descriptive, which spoke about some things that happened 250 years ago, and then how exactly did things change and what is happening today, what all are some of the notions that we have which may or may not be true, and so on and so forth. So if you had a good idea or even a basic idea of what ozone layer looks like, I think this was a passage that you would have enjoyed reading and enjoyed answering. I thought that there were a couple of questions that had close options, because of which I would say that there were 2 questions that were extremely straightforward and 2 questions that were moderate in nature. If you wish to know which questions did I grade as easy and which questions did I grade as moderate, let me know. I will either share the sheet that I have prepared for my analysis, or I will try to write it in the comment section below as to why did I think a particular question was easy or moderate in nature. The third passage was in terms of control of the spice trade by the Portuguese. So how exactly did they start? What exactly did they do? What policies did they try to implement which were not very successful, and so on and so forth. The passage was very easy to read. Again, something that as potential business administration people, you would know that these are the problems that might happen. So if someone reads the passage with the anticipation that something is going to happen, you would have enjoyed reading this passage, because as you started, you realize that no, things are going to go downhill from here, and downhill they went. So this is basically the passage that you would have enjoyed reading and predicting and even solving. So I think 2 questions were very easy, straightforward in this particular passage. One was moderate and 1 question I thought was difficult in nature. The only problem was this was historical in nature. So whenever someone talks about 250 years back, people get slightly defensive. Whenever they hear about the Portuguese, the Dutch and whatnot, they become slightly defensive when it comes to attempting this particular passage. But this was an example that you can let go of your fears and still attempt this passage. So what to not do? This was passage number 4. Now every year at the CAT over the last 3 or 4 years, we have seen that one passage is particularly nasty. Either it's very difficult to read or it's very difficult to answer, and this was that passage in this particular SimCAT. So rich and poor countries, what exactly is the difference? How colonialization works? If they are there to kind of support the economies of these countries, how do they grow or how can they grow? And if they are exploitative in nature, then how exactly these countries suffer? So very good passage in terms of reading, but in terms of solving, I would not really go for this passage in this particular test because there were so many questions that you could do. So I would say that this was the difficult or one of the most difficult passages that have appeared at the SimCATs or are going to appear at the SimCATs. But I thought that this was an out and out passage that you should have left alone. 1 moderate question and 3 difficult questions in this particular passage. So ideally you should have attempted passages 1 and 2 in 15 minutes, both of them cumulatively. Passage 3 you could have taken a bit longer, 10 minutes to attempt that particular question. Accuracy I am looking at is 80%. Passage 4 is something that you should have left alone and should not have touched at all. Now let's go to the verbal ability part of this particular section. In terms of verbal ability, the easiest question type that we had today was odd sentence out, which had 2 easy questions. Both the questions were extremely straightforward. I will talk about the takeaways towards the end, wherein I will talk about one particular trait that connected these 2 odd sentence out questions. The second question type is paragraph completion, which had 1 moderate question and 2 difficult questions. So this was something that I thought was particularly nasty because you could never figure out where that statement is going to be. So in this particular context, all 3 questions I thought were on the difficult side. 1 question you could have managed, but 2 questions were definitely difficult. In terms of paragraph summary, 1 question I thought was fairly straightforward. You could have managed it, and 2 questions were on the difficult side because the options were extremely close and there was very little to choose between the 2 options that you would have zeroed it down to. In terms of odd sentence out, they were must attempts. You had to attempt these 2 questions within 5 minutes and they would have given you very rich dividends. In fact, someone is a fast reader, I think they would have been able to attempt this particular question type in maybe 2 or 3 minutes. So easily you could have managed 2 questions in around 3 minutes or so. But even if you are someone who is a slightly slower reader, I think these should have been prioritized over anything else. Of course, there is no way to know this when you are taking the test, but once you look at the entire section, you will realize that odd sentence out were very easy to spot. And this comes with experience. So with more SimCATs, you will be able to see that these things will stand out and you will be able to attempt in a nice manner. In terms of the entire section, if you are scoring more than 35 marks, which was definitely possible had you attempted the 3 RCs and the 2 odd sentence outs, these questions if you would have attempted, I think it was fine. You would have been able to get a score of above 30. Anything above 35 I think should make you happy. It's a good start at the very beginning of your test taking season. In terms of DILR, there were 5 sets that were there. The first set that I came across was the bar graph that was there. It was an easy set that we had. There were 2 easy questions and 2 moderate questions. Now, I would not say the moderate questions were also moderate or difficult, but suddenly what happens is when you are solving a set, you are very happy solving the first question, very happy solving the second question, and suddenly you get additional information. And that kind of irritates you a bit. You think that, okay, I have solved these 2 questions and now I have to work again to solve the other 2 questions. That is basically something that might affect you mentally or it might affect you psychologically, because of which I thought that these 2 questions were moderate in nature, question number 3 and 4. But otherwise, it was a fairly easy set, very easy to understand. There was nothing in that set that was complicated or something that you would have not seen at all. So it was a very straightforward set. The next set was a magic square set. Now, if you would have realized that it is a magic square set, it would be an easy set. You just figure out what exactly is the sum going to be, and once you figure out that 34 is the magic number that you're looking at, because 1 plus 16, 2 plus 15, 3 plus 14, everything will add up to 17. You know that the middle four numbers should add up to 34. Once you realize that, life would have been much easier for you. There was one small bottleneck, but once you figured out that this was basically the bottleneck, and if you persist, you would be able to overcome that. You would have got one nice arrangement that would have cracked this entire set. So very easy set if you are able to crack it. So magic square, I think, was an easy set. The third one that I came across was a table based set wherein you had variables that were there, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, and A to I were consecutive natural numbers. Now people who thought that they are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you would have been in big trouble, because nowhere was it mentioned that they are single digit natural numbers. Even my first impression was that they should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, but it was not the case. But if you knew that the horizontal numbers have to add to 100%, that was basically the clincher. If you would have figured that out, this set would have been easy for you. I have written it moderate because you had to replicate the entire table on your rough sheet. So if you are replicating the entire table on your rough sheet, you are going to maybe make a mistake here and there, or if you are not able to calculate mentally, you will struggle with the calculations. That's why I have put it as moderate, but otherwise for all practical purposes, it was a pretty doable set. In terms of the fourth set that we had here, which was the marbles game based set, I thought it was a very difficult set purely because there was one small bit that I struggled with when I solved it. I had to let go of this set. I did not try this at all, to be very honest with you. So when I started with this set, I was under the impression that people have 45 marbles with them, and then they are going to get another 45 marbles in round 1. That was my impression. So I thought that 45 marbles is what they possess, and additional 45 marbles, meaning that they would have 90 marbles at the end of round 1. Round 2, they were only shifting marbles from one person to the other. That I understood. So I thought that overall we are dealing with 90 marbles somehow, but that was not the case. You had to deal with 45 marbles itself throughout the entire process. But I thought that that was not very clear when I read the entire set. So maybe I missed something, but I think that could have been maybe clarified in a better manner. I thought that this was obviously the most difficult, and everybody would have realized this. So all 5 questions I have classified as difficult. In terms of the fifth set, that was the pie chart based set. It looked very simple because there was only one pie chart. There are only 4 pieces of the pie that were there, and the numbers were also fairly manageable. But once you started doing that set, you would have realized that there are some complicated situations that might arise. There were at least 2 variables that you would have to take. If you figured out that 20%, 20%, 20% were linked, then you would have managed it well. The only problem here, I am going to discuss this in the takeaways as well, is the kind of information that was provided. So stay tuned for the takeaways slide, and there I will discuss more about this pie chart, which I thought was a slight hurdle. In terms of the attempt strategy, I think set 1 and set 2, bar graph and magic square, had to be attempted if you had to get a good score. Set 5, I thought, was the next set that you should have prioritized, which basically means that all the 4 question sets were manageable, more manageable compared to the 5 question sets. And the next one, if you had time, you could have attempted set 3, which was a table based set, because you had to do a lot of calculation in that table. That was what made it difficult. But if you were really good with numbers, maybe you could have prioritized set 3 over set 5. Not saying that set 5 did not have calculation, but set 3 calculation was much more straightforward compared to set 5 calculation. That's why I would say that set 4 had to be skipped. You need not worry about set 4 at all. Let go of set 4 in whichever situation you come across it. Now in this particular context, I think 30 plus should have made you happy, which basically means 10 questions. If you had attempted the 2 easy questions from set 1, 4 easy questions from set 2, and 4 easy questions from set 5, I think you should have been sorted, should not have been an issue at all. So I think all these could have been managed. So 10 questions would not have been a difficult thing to manage, and if you got everything right, then of course 30 would have been possible. I think 30 plus should have made you really happy. In terms of quant, we saw a good representation across the 5 areas that were there. Arithmetic was lengthy and deceptive. So arithmetic, typically people think that it is very easy because there are very few formulas that are there. There will be elaborate stories when it comes to the questions. But if you looked at the test, Arithmetic was slightly on the lengthier side. It was very deceptive. You might have got into a question thinking that you will be able to get it right, but it was very difficult or lengthy. So I have split this as 2 easy, 5 moderate and 1 difficult. There was one question which I thought was outright difficult, but otherwise almost everything was moderate in nature. Why am I saying moderate in nature? Because it required you to take that leap of faith and jump into the question, put variables and then solve it, and then your solution would have taken 3 or 4 or 5 steps, but you would have arrived at the solution, but you had to persist. And that was what arithmetic was all about. It was properly lengthy though. If you look at the next area, which is algebra, 7 questions, 3 easy, 3 difficult, 1 moderate. That was the split that I thought would have been the case. And I have written IYK, YK. It's basically if you know, you know. But that's literally what algebra was like. If you knew how to solve a particular question, then you would have definitely got marks for it. If you were not aware that you had to cube something, or if you are not aware what exactly happens when you kind of have a cubic equation wherein 2 things are similar and you have to cancel those things, you would not have been able to get the answer at all. Similarly, in case of inequality, similarly in case of graphs, all those questions required you to know a few things. If you knew your things, then you would have been sorted. Otherwise, you would be in some amount of trouble. To speak in terms of IMS parlance, I would say that if you have done your second module comfortably, I think you would have enjoyed this section. But if you have not done your module 2, I think you will struggle with this particular section. In terms of geometry, there were 3 questions that I could spot. 1 easy, 2 moderate. Mainstream concepts, tangent secant theorem, or the triangles and basic proportionality theorem, all those kind of questions were there. Fairly straightforward, manageable questions. I thought that the area question was slightly more difficult, or it required a slightly more nuanced approach compared to the other 2 questions. But otherwise, nothing that we have not seen in geometry earlier. In terms of modern math, both the questions I thought were moderate in nature. They were manageable. 1 question on set theory, fairly straightforward, but it was a lengthy question. So you have to put in a lot of effort to get 1 or 3 marks, 1 question right. That's what made it slightly moderate in nature. In terms of number theory, I thought 1 easy, 1 difficult question was there. The difficult question was on divisibility. Again, it was usual, nothing out of the ordinary, I would say, in terms of quant. It was an attritional test or an attritional section here, because you had to go through again one section, then another, and then come to a quant section which was on the moderate to difficult side, I would say. So it was an attritional test. If you felt tired when you were solving quant and you did a bit of button mashing and marked something at the end and that spoiled your test, then maybe you need to work on your test taking stamina. That is the takeaway that I have for quant. And in terms of attempts, if you have attempted 10 plus questions, genuinely I'm not talking about theta questions that you marked randomly. If you solved something, arrived at an answer and marked it convincingly, then I would say kudos to you. Keep up the good work, and I think you should do well. So 10 plus questions, if you are getting 25 plus or 30 plus marks, I think it's a brilliant attempt in this QA section. Now in terms of score versus percentile, of course you are going to get your scores and percentiles on your My IMS dashboard, but this is basically what I think CAT would have looked like had it been SimCAT 1. So if SimCAT 1 is the same as CAT 25, I think these are the scores that will correspond to this percentile. These are very similar to what happened in CAT 24, by the way. So you will see very close numbers that are there. So I think a score of 39 in VARC will translate into a 99 percentile, 37 in DLR will translate into a 99 percentile, 36 in QA will translate to a 99 percentile. Overall, if you are crossing 100, I think 99 percentile should happen. Having said that, I think if you are taking the SimCAT, then maybe a score of a 90 or a 95 can easily take you to a 99 percentile, considering that not all caretakers will be taking SimCATs, and the people who are taking SimCATs are going to be the very serious ones. Now, before we move to the key takeaways section, one announcement for all of you. As we saw in the quant section, it's very important for you to have your basics in place, and if you are struggling with basics, you want to learn quant the easy way, the entire Power Prep program that we have launched, which is a self-paced learning program, is out there. Have a look at it by visiting the link in the description box below. The entire program is available for 5,000 rupees, including all taxes and everything. And there are detailed videos about each topic that are going to be there. So have a look at that program. In case you are struggling with quant, all the sessions have been recorded by me. Also, there are quite a few practice questions that are there. More than 700 practice questions are also there with detailed solutions. So have a look at this particular course if you wish to improve your quant from scratch. Now, if you look at the takeaways that we had from this particular test, the first thing that I came across was an odd sentence out question, and we always have to look at positive versus negative outcomes. So although the instruction tells you that you have to arrange 4 out of 5 statements into a coherent logical paragraph, and one sentence or one statement is going to be the odd sentence out or the odd one out, you are not expected to arrange the remaining 4 sentences in the form of paragraph. You just have to figure out which statement is not pertinent to the discussion, and that is basically what needed to be done in this case, because the statement that was there spoke about a negative aspect of something, whereas the other statements spoke about the positive aspects of the very thing. You would have been able to figure out which exactly is the odd one out. So always keep that in mind. That is generally going to be my first checkpoint, which statement is different in terms of tone. And then if everything is same in terms of tone, then I will call it a moderate or a difficult question, because then you will have to look at linkages, you will have to look at the flow, and then you will have to answer that particular question as to which statement is the odd one out. In terms of para completion, one takeaway that I got from this test was that the statement, a generic statement, could be sandwiched between 2 specific statements. So somewhere I am talking about Sweden, then I am making a generic statement, and again I am talking about Sweden. These kind of things can happen. I did not get this one right because I thought that 2 Swedens had to come one after the other, but yes, sandwiches might exist. This is something that you also would have to keep in mind going forward. If it makes sense to you, then go for it. Otherwise, in terms of VERC, I would strongly suggest that to prioritize accuracy over anything else. In terms of DILR, pay attention to the legend, because what happened in the first question of the first set that I saw, the total was supposed to be 45,000. So 45,000 tickets were sold on each day on that app. But what happened here was the legend was still 40,000. So there's a tendency for you to go and check only the difference from 40,000 and say that, okay, these were the number of tickets that were purchased between 9:15 to 9:20. Now the options were slightly friendly, which I did not really like, because if I am an evil test taker or evil paper setter rather, I would have engineered the options in such a way that there would have been some option which spoke about a difference from 4,000 or 40,000 rather, right? That is something I would have done instead of 45,000. So that was a place where people could have missed the point. So make sure that you are paying attention to the legend. In terms of DILR, as I said earlier, the pie chart question had ratios in the form of 1:2, 2:3, 3:4. But then I did not really know that it's supposed to be taken in that order. Now the argument against that is, if I am saying that A and B have their ages in the ratio of say 3:4, then we assume that A's age is 3x and B's age is 4x. So for 4 items as well, that is supposed to be assumed. Now I thought that 20% made a lot of sense, because 1:2, 2:3, 3:4 was 20%. The pie chart showed 20%, and there had to be a starting point. Otherwise this question would not have been solved, or you would not have been able to solve this question. That's why I assume that 1:2, 2:3, 3:4 has to be in that order. But if nothing has been given and there is no breakthrough in that question, you can assume that 1:2, 2:3, 3:4 has to be assumed in the same order as the 4 items that would have been mentioned. In terms of QA, you have to use variables in arithmetic and you have to substitute in DILR. Those were the 2 things that you would have come across in this test. You had to use variables in arithmetic. You had to start with say 7y, 5y, 5x or 10x, 14x and so on and so forth. All those things you had to do in this particular section. If you would have done that, you would have cracked a few questions that you thought would not, which were impossible in nature. So use variables freely if you think that the question is manageable. In terms of the selection strategy, this was a test that also rewarded people who were good in terms of selecting and rejecting questions. So you are in command of your 120 minutes. You have to decide what you are going to do with your 120 minutes. If you get carried away and you try to solve questions that you like, then you are going to be in big trouble. You have to solve questions that deserve to be solved. There is a very big difference between these two. So people who got stuck in the first 5 questions, they would have struggled throughout the entire test. But people who were like, okay, I'm not going to solve these questions because I think these questions are difficult. I will solve these questions after the test is done. I am going to get the test paper. So why do I need to solve these questions at the beginning? I will maybe look at these questions towards the end. I will solve the questions that I know I will definitely be able to solve within maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and then I will take it from there. So whoever thought like this would have done well in this test. Whoever got stuck would have not done well in this particular test. Now you also have to improve with each passing test in terms terms of SimCAT, you will have AI enabled practice, which you can have a look at, and you can practice similar questions that are there in the QA section specifically, and you will be able to improve with each passing test, because you will test yourself on the same concepts that would have appeared at the test as well. Very, very important, you have to discuss your answers. You can't really say that I have solved a test and I'm not going to discuss it with anyone. I'm just going to think about what exactly I did and what went right, what went wrong, and then I'm not going to think about it at all. That's a really bad strategy. So make sure that you are discussing your answers with someone. It could be a friend, it could be on a group, it could be in the comment section of this video as well. It doesn't matter, right? You have to discuss your answers if you are to improve. Otherwise, you will keep on doing the same things again and again. You will keep on going wrong again and again. It will not help you at all. Now, for those of you who haven't purchased SimCATs, again, I would like to reiterate that you have a special flat 10% discount on your SimCAT purchase. You have to use the code 0.99IMS. The code is there in the description box below as well. So do have a look at it. Use the correct code and you will get a flat 10% discount. Also, you are going to get 3 additional bonus discussion or mock discussion sessions that would be conducted by me. So we will get in touch with you once you figure out that you have used this particular code, and then we can call you or invite you for those sessions that are there. I hope you enjoyed having a look at this video. You enjoyed taking SimCAT 1. If you have some feedback, if you have some additional requirement, do let me know in the comment section below. If you would like me to do these things for all the tests that are there, all the major mock tests that are there, do let me know. I'll try to do it for as many tests as I can, so that you have a good reference point when it comes to revising tests, or maybe trying to take some tests at the end of your test taking season. So do comment in the section below, what was your score like, what was your percentile like, and what did you think about this particular test.